Hi, everyone. How's it going? This is Bonnie Violet, and I am a queer chaplain. And I'm super excited that you are here. In case you don't know where you are, this is Drag and Spirituality, our Named and Known series, hosted by Urban Village Church. In this series, we are interviewing 6 Chicago-based drag artists to talk about their experience with drag and spirituality. And this is an experience where church meets a drag show. So feel free to tip your queen, tip your artist at Venmo at Tony-Guerrero. You can see that just on top of, just above Vawisp, as well as Juan Pablo. Will probably post it here in a second because he's awesome like that. Which, we've been doing this for a few weeks and I've never said thank you and acknowledged. So thank you, Juan Pablo, for being the master behind the scenes throughout this whole series. So what else am I have to, I think, you know what? I don't care. Questions, comments, those sorts of things, feel free to interact with us. We'll bring the questions and the comments up just as soon as we can. Hello, Elizabeth. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. Our guest this evening is Willa Vawisp.
Hello, hello.
Hey, you. You got some smoke?
Playing with fire.
Playing with fire, huh? What's going on over there?
I'm just burning a little bit of sage, cleansing a little bit of the moment for me, for us, this joint experience. Also, drag queens and fire. What could go wrong?
Right? I know.
Nothing here is flammable at all.
Oh, right. Yeah. Drag queen on fire coming to
drag queen on fire. Oh my gosh.
Coming to a theater near you. For sure.
Hello, Sasha.
Ooh, hey. All right. So I like to really just kind of dive right in. I'm not like, I don't know, that's just how I do it. So how about you tell us a little bit about yourself as a little one growing up as a child?
Ooh, let's go way, way back.
Way back.
So I'm originally from Mexico City. And as a little bitty one, I was born and raised there, and I lived there until I was 18. And I mean, for like a year, I lived in Chicago. Like my parents thought, ooh, maybe we could do it. And then we did it. I lived in Oak Park. And then I have vague memories of living in Oak Park. It was nice. I was 4. Correction. I have some memories of termites, but it was, for the most part, as a itty bitty one, I was always wild, like in a very distinct sort of like unwilling to let other people tell me what I was thinking kind of way and what I was doing. And I would get in trouble with my parents, or I was always like a good kid in behavior, but I was always the kind of person who would like step up to authority. I'd get in trouble with my teachers. I was just one of those kinds of people who like didn't want to be told. And then like, I think as a high schooler, I really, and as a middle schooler, I really experienced some of like the burdens of what it felt to be different and what it felt to be queer or gay, or I identify as queer, how to be perceived as that. Also, as a kid, I was very, very large. I was the O word. I don't love that word for kids. I think it's pretty harmful. Yeah. I was the O word, and that was hard for me as a kid growing up, to just sort of be picked on for being very this, and then also big. And I think over time, I began to discover I stopped being as loud and as all over the places I was. And it wasn't, I think, until my later years in high school where I decided, you know what, forget it. I'm going to be this person. I'm going to rediscover this person. And once I definitely left high school and I came to the United States to college, I decided, you know what, clean slate. No one here knows me. Because I went to school with the same people from kindergarten to 12th grade. So we knew everything about everyone. And come around, I was like, no one knows me. I get to just be who I am. So I think when I remember asking one of my oldest friends, like, what was I like as a kid? And she was like, you were never willing to let other people tell you how you needed to be, and that made it hard for you as a kid, because some kids can be cruel. And I think that was just like who I was. I was always, you know, coloring and drawing and obsessed with like, and I think all little queer kids go through like their mythology phase and their, I don't know, their obsession with Egyptology and dinosaurs. And I was like that kid who would spend hours poring over like these myths of gods and goddesses and trying to be like this kind of person who was obsessed with all these artistic moments and these spiritual things. Would
you say that's a way that you kind of coped with some of the challenges growing up, was kind of
absolutely
escaping into the fantasy?
Absolutely. I think it was very much a situation of art being a space that I could just like disengage from things. I went through a lot of I think that there were a few things that I really spent a lot of time focusing on to like really come to terms with who I felt I was. And one of them was art. My dad is a musician. He's a professional musician. So I was always surrounded by the idea that art was good, right? That was a thing in our household, that being an artist is an important part of life. And I saw all the ins and outs of what it meant to be a professional artist, the beauties and the pitfalls, right? And I got to really see the world through his eyes. And I honestly can't listen to the piano without immediately thinking of him and just who he is. He's a jazz musician. And so I think that I started my music, my love for music and performance through that. So I was in theater as a kid. I always wanted to get the best parts. You know, sometimes when you put on like a theater production as a kid in like fourth grade or something, and some kids are doing the stage and some kids are doing the costume, I was like, I'm the talent.
Right.
Heart the seas, it is me.
Right. You were the star.
100%. This big fat like star moment, just being like, hello, his mom.
Right. Not much has changed, right? As far as like being the star.
Oh, absolutely not. I just got better at looking like one.
There you go. Did you did you grow up with any sort of like religion or spirituality within your family?
Yes, I did. It was, I described my spiritual upbringing as a mixed bag, an eclectic mixed bag of many things. So growing up in Mexico, it's pretty hard to grow up as if, unless you're not Catholic. For the most part, Catholicism imbues experience in Mexico, even just like culturally, the way people live their lives. You know, spring break is around Holy Week and around Easter, and you know, Christmas is a big deal, even if you're not Catholic or Christian. Like, so I grew up with that in that cultural set, and then also I did go to Catholic church, and I would sometimes just fall asleep in the pews, or you know, act out because I was bored. Or, I don't know if you, so the church that I went to is one of the oldest churches in Mexico. It's where the Virgin of Guadalupe was presented in Tlatelolco, and the priest was lovely, but he did a large portion of the service in Latin, and I was like, sir, Wendy's, like, this is hella boring. I am so sorry. So I spent a large portion of the time actually like looking at the art in the ceiling, and I would like spend hours just staring at the ceiling. And I actually love churches because they are like works of art. Churches are like, I get gobsmacked every time I walk into a church. And so I would spend hours just staring at the artwork and staring at the little things and the engravings in the wooden pews, and you know, in the confessionary, right, whatever you call it. But yeah, I remember going to Sunday school and acting out there and telling my teacher that she was wrong, getting in trouble. But so there was that component. I was raised in many parts Catholic, but I was also raised in a separate cultural spiritual practice that I think is probably familiar to many Latinx folks, who grew up in Mexico or anywhere where you have sort of this syncretic mishmash faith, where you bring in some native people's practices, and then you bring in some other practices. So it was called, I think I would call it spiritualism, Trinitarian spiritualism, I think, is the best description of the faith. And they have temples, and the ones in Mexico, there's only like 3 or 4 of them in Mexico City. And they started in the early 1900s because during that time there was this obsession with spiritism and spirits, and there was also that obsession with, that's like the whole Ouija board, the whole everything, right? Spirits and seances, right? And that brought in this experience, tie that with the experience of angel and saint worship, and tie that together with native experiences of ancestor and God, and a polytheistic God experience. Then they would all come together. And then to just sort of add on to that, there would be just a lot of, there would also be like Orientalism, I would say, guided by the movement of Orientalism. So let me be clear, the word Oriental is not what I'm using here, but I'm using the word of the term Orientalism with the obsession of Eastern cultures that happened a lot in the 1900s, at the beginning of the 1900s. And so it would bring in a lot of those practices too. So this became this like mix of so many different faiths, and a mix of so many different experiences. And so I grew up going to both the Catholic Church and also to temple. And my grandmother was very connected to the temple, as was my father. And we were part of this sort of like one of the families who was very connected to the spiritual practice of this temple and the sustainment of this temple. So I don't know if you've ever seen the way in which, and I think Juan Pablo asked it, does limpia de huevo come from that tradition? Limpia de huevo means an egg cleanse. It's when someone will pass an egg along you to remove energy, to cleanse your energy, to cleanse your aura. I don't think it comes from spiritualism. I think that's actually a more native practice, just in general, the experience of cleansing. But there are so many different ways that you can get a cleanse. And I'm sure a lot of Latinx folks have had their tia, their aunt, just come over and cleanse them with an egg or a lemon. I once had someone clean me with a burning bush. They told me that if that didn't fix me, they were going to use a black chicken. And I really did not want that kind of black cock around me.
Right. Yeah.
So it was just like, it's hard to describe my faith, but it was like a mishmash of everything. And that's why now I'm the person who like is very like spiritual, you know, like crystals and my sage, because I grew up burning incense and I actually also, surprisingly enough, because of all of this, my aunt started practicing Hinduism and Buddhism. And then my grandmother did as well. And they started practicing and following Hinduism as part of their spiritual journey. And so I ended up also going to ashrams as a kid and meditating at ashrams with them. And so there was this whole like, faith was just an exploratory experience, but also this very deeply like, at the end of the day, we felt that it was all connected to the divine. We were all in every practice connected to the experience of feeling grounded in faith and sort of like also elevated. But I was like 13, so I don't think I really had that experience then. But now that I look back on it, I'm like, oh, look at that.
Right. But were you interested? Did you enjoy it? Or what was what did you think about it when you were young?
Well, that's the question. I'm like, did I enjoy it? I think mixed bag, right? So there are things that I loved. For instance, going to the ashram was such a beautiful experience. I would go with my aunt to the ashram during Holi. I would also go during Diwali, and we would celebrate those times. And then it was very beautiful to go during Diwali and to go during Ganesha's celebration as well, and to meditate. And it was very foreign at the time to me because I didn't practice it at that time. And I definitely felt a sense of like deep, like, oh, this is nice, this is spiritual, and this is important. And people were open and welcoming. And I think other things I didn't like. So I, for instance, did not love that at the temple that we would go, they would separate the genders, and they would have men and young boys sitting together and women and young girls sitting together. And that felt very, first of all, bizarre to me, because when we would go as a family. And I would sit with my dad, and then my mom would be like on the entire other side, like sitting with a bunch of people I didn't know. And, oh, thank you, Nicole. And that kind of irked me, right? The experience of like this separation of genders was so arbitrary and bizarre, because then you would then see people channeling ancestral powers, ancestral guides, spiritual guides. You'd see people channeling spirits. Or, I forgot to mention that another component of spiritualism is the channeling and the mediumship, which also comes from both Native experiences and also from African faiths. So there would also be Orisha worship. And so when there would be the channeling of an ancestor, the channeling of a spirit guide, the gender of the spirit guide wouldn't match the channeler all the time. And I found it very bizarre for there to be these arbitrary lines on gender. And I don't know if that's the way it is now, but that's the way it was then. And that kind of pissed me off. And I would be very upset that I couldn't sit with my grandmother, that I couldn't sit with my mom. And then I would probably just fall asleep.
Yeah. There was a question from Sasha. Many folks differentiate religion from spirituality. Do you? Did I pronounce?
I definitely do. I think spirituality is a practice of self-discovery, right? Everyone can have their own individual spiritual experience. Not everyone has the same spirituality, right? Everyone sort of walks through these different paces at their own time, through their own faith, and if they want to, right?
Right. Would you say there are two different? Like, do you think it would be your religious or your spiritual, or can you be both?
I think you can also be both. I definitely know a lot of people who are religious who are not spiritual. Not casting aspersions towards them, but sometimes you can see that. I think that one of the distinctions that I do put on is around culture and tradition. Religion has a culture. It has a tradition. You go to church for Easter. You fast. You fast, and you don't eat meat in the 40 days leading up to, right? And so there is a cultural and traditional practice around that. And then that's religion. And spirituality is then, in that case, what you get from it, what you get from doing those practices. So, and since my faith has not always been religious, but has been deeply embedded in my own self-exploration, that's why I differentiate my religion from my spirituality, because I wouldn't say I'm a religious person.
Right.
I don't necessarily always abide by the rules of certain cultural practices in the religion, but I certainly will abide them if I find that they connect with my spiritual experience and what I want to explore. So
yeah, I feel like spirituality is kind of like going straight to the source. Whereas sometimes like religion or ritual can be a way of connecting with it when you're kind of not able to, like on your own, that sort of thing. So just as a follow-up, they say, very well put, spirituality is what you get from the religion or culture. Love that. Yes.
And I think that in the last couple of years, I've also become more connected to my religious experience as well. I think as queer people, we experience a lot of trauma around religion and around spirituality growing up. And I wouldn't say I experienced a lot of it personally all the time, although I think the gender thing really pissed me off because I was also like, I didn't always feel male as a kid. And so it would always be weird. I always felt more connected to my mother 9 times out of 10. So that always pissed me off. But I think the trauma that we grew up with, being exposed to the ways in which sometimes some religions discuss identities, and specifically gender minorities and sexual minorities, it can push us away. And then if we find spirituality and religion later in life, it is through a process of self-discovery and of a desire to want to be a part of that ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the case for you, but
yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think, I think religion was something that I started with, and it harmed me. I no longer fit in the mold. So then I had to kind of go out into the world without it. I found it kind of in drugs and alcohol for a while. And then eventually I would say I became spiritual, and I got a connection with my understanding of God, the divine higher power. And then now that I've been spiritual a little longer, I'm more comfortable with the idea of landing in religion or religious spaces, because I'm confident in who I am and my connection with my understanding. I can sit anywhere, even if they don't want me there or they don't think I should be there. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I love that. And I think that as soon as you said that, it made me think of something. Religion is also about community. Spirituality is individual. My spirituality is completely distinct from yours, but we can share religious ritual, culture, practice for the purposes of our community and the purposes of you and I connecting to each other through this shared experience. And I think that that's actually something that I'm now probably more interested in than I was before. Now, I certainly think that during this pandemic, all of us could use a little bit more community.
Right.
And so I would say that I do turn to my faith sometimes to find both answers internally, but also the sense of being connected. And I can't tell you the number of times I've called my dad being like, so hi, we used to never talk about religion and spirituality, but in these last 3 years, I've really needed it. Can we talk about like everything? And I'm like really getting him to like give me all this rundown of his experience. And that's why I'm learning so much more about our faith, which I don't think I could have had this conversation with you 3 years ago. Yeah. I think I would have been like, I don't know, my faith is something, right?
Yeah, totally. Nicole says she loves that distinction. I've come back to religion mostly for reasons of community. I definitely get that. I think for me, when I was young, I ran away from home into church, and church was kind of like my safety. But it wasn't, I don't think, spiritual at that time. So I think there's still an element of like landing in a religious space or a setting as a way, as kind of like a foundation or a net to kind of keep you okay or keep you going through some difficult times. I think, it's like something to land in. At least that's my experience.
Absolutely. I definitely feel that. And I definitely understand that coming into all of these places, the purpose is safety. The purpose is feeling connected, but also feeling a sense of peace and a sense of like oneness with the people you're with, and a sense of being loved. And I think that that's what we're craving when we're looking for faith, when we're looking for religion. We're looking for the experience of having some of that. And I don't know, when I would go to the temple, or when I would go to the church, or even when I go to the ashram, which, by the way, I didn't describe what an ashram is. An ashram is a Hindu temple. I would not always find that peace. Although I would say I found it the most at the ashram, because the ashram was dope. That was super fun. Beautiful flowers everywhere. And as you can tell, I love flowers.
Right.
But I think that it wasn't until later and now that I can walk in today and feel like, oh, I think I have this sense of internal peace now, that I know how to find community. Because when I didn't feel comfortable with myself, and when I didn't feel like the people around me would support that, I certainly wouldn't know how to seek that community.
Right.
And now I think I could walk, as you said, into any space and say, like, yes, this is me, and hello. And
yes. And Nicole says she also agrees with the sentiment coming back to faith, specifically that of our parents when we were older. Kind of like as a follow-up to spirituality, I think there's an element of, I guess what's coming to my mind right now, I usually don't try to say too much, but is like the concept of and I lost my frame of mind. I think something's telling me to be quiet.
The guides are saying, think of it again.
Right? It'll come back to me.
Yeah. My mom always says it must have been a lie. But I always say, now I say, maybe the guides are saying, think of it a little second longer.
Right, a little bit longer. Let's go ahead though and take a little break. We're going to play like a little video clip, and then we'll come back, and maybe if folks have more questions, and I'll
ask us questions.
All right, play that video. And we're back.
Palo Santo now.
Right, I can feel it over here. It's helpful.
I want to get a singing bowl, but I'm a little too loud to begin with, and I think I would just be banging it everywhere. I don't get no sleep because of y'all. Y'all don't get no sleep because of me. Boom.
Right. I was thinking it's a great segue to jump into drag, and so there was a comment from I feel like I'm not saying it correctly, Sasha. How does your being a fabulous drag queen play into your spirituality, if at all?
That's a great question. I actually didn't fully connect the dots on that until I think later on. I think when I thought about my drag when I was first coming up with it, I didn't think that it was connected to spirituality. Now that I think about it, the name Willa Vawisp, it's a spiritual connection, which I wasn't noticing. Willa Vawisp is a spirit guide in Celtic tradition. Will o' the Wisp guides you sometimes to great things, sometimes to not so great things. But the purpose is to be a spirit guide. I got it from The Sound of Music because they were talking about Maria being a will o' the wisp and just being fleety and floaty. And I always wondered what it would be like to be graceful, fleety, floaty swan. I am one of those things. But I think that as I've thought a lot about who I am as a person, I've discovered my experience of gender to be a lot more exploratory. And drag opened that up to me in a really big way. I was like, oh my God, my gender isn't this structured thing.
Yeah.
And with that, I think what it's really rooted in is I'm getting to know these very intimate moments of the powerful divine feminine and the powerful divine masculine and the power of my divinity that has nothing to do with just my energy of who I am as a person. And I don't think that I conceived my drag to be that, but I think that as I play with the crayons of what it's like to be a human being and what it's like to be who I am, I get to explore who I can show myself as and how I can be. And I think that's a spiritual experience too. And truth be told, there's a ritual to drag. I don't know what you do, but I think we all as drag performers, we have a moment where we really have to get into our zen, into our space, and we really even if it's a chaotic mess in front of us of makeup brushes and everything else, it's a meditative process where you really come to tune with who you are and what you're willing to do, and it's a very trust the process situation, because this doesn't look like this 2 hours ago.
Right.
And so I think that ritual is also a very spiritual practice, because you begin to do these things that bring you into who you are. And I don't think that we think of them as spiritual, but I think that the idea that spirituality is this like big thing, right, that like can't be done through the small things, is something that I actually resist. And so for me, accessing my spirituality through drag makes sense, because I have a ritual, I have a practice. And when I put on the lashes, when I put on the wig, yes, am I feeling myself? Absolutely. But I'm feeling myself because all of a sudden a part of me feels alive, right? And I'm like, I feel alive. My soul, my spirit feels excited. And even when we're performing, there's an electricity to it. There's an art, there's a movement to it, which really, when you walk off the stage, you're shaking because you're just so excited. Yeah. And you can't tell me that isn't spiritual. You can't tell me that that's not raw power going straight through you because you were just taken through that moment. So I think drag is spiritual because it's art, because it's expression, and because in many parts it's magic.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's such a vulnerability that is experienced because we're putting ourselves, especially in the way the world is now, is like we're putting ourselves out there in a way in which, people are going to come at us in a lot of different ways. Charles has a question.
Charles. Hello,
Charles, right? Do you find your trusting of the ritual of drag tied to your upbringing in a spiritual context?
I don't think I thought about it that way. I don't think I thought about it. But I do think that there is an inherent faith and an inherent trust that you have to put into it. First, you have to have faith in yourself, right? The first is like, look, regardless of anything, I have to go to this job. I have to go to this booking. I have things I need to do. Right. So I have to put faith that I'm capable. And that faith is, that's a faith that's hard to come up with, right? To say like the gumption to say, I am capable, because there are so many moments when you're coming up with this and things go wrong, things go askew, and you just have to be like, sis, get it together, come to Jesus, and tell yourself that you are willing to get it done because you care about what you're doing and because you love this, right? And I think that there is a part of that is trusting the process as a process of faith. And then I think that that same practice of sitting with yourself and saying, I believe in myself enough, and I believe that this can happen, or I believe in that which guides me to do it, right? And I think when I'm met with big things, when I'm met with big questions that keep me up at night, I have to sit with that question too. And I have to go back and say, I have to believe right now that this is going to walk me through that process because I love myself, because I love what I'm doing, because I love the people I'm doing it for, because I'm committed to this. And I just have to dive in, right? And keep going.
Yeah. And there's, I think the other part that comes to mind is that idea that there is things passed down to us. So there are like people who came before us, there are family, there are queens and kings and other royalty that came before us, and what they've learned and what they practice, they pass on down to us. And so I think that sometimes as queer people, we can't necessarily get that from our family of origins. So I think it is a way for us to transfer wisdom and experience from one generation to another.
Completely agreed. And that's such an important component of queer culture, right? Being able to share the wisdom down and across. And I think that I sometimes sit and wonder about this because I think a lot about. So I have a deep and very powerful connection to my family that has mostly been relatively positive. There have been some moments that have just not been the coolest, but for the most part, I would say that my experience and my relationship with my family is very, very good. And So for that, when I think about like my ancestral history, I think about like the power that I'm bringing into myself through them and for them and towards others. And I think that that's very similar to the experience of sharing what you know and the wisdom that you have through drag.
Yes, indeed. Sasha has I think, it's a comment or question. Sasha says, I heard that drag queens are magical. From the video I watched of drag queens reading to children, they are the true fairy godmothers. Kids love them.
I think drag performers are absolutely magical.
Yep.
First of all, it's a magic of illusion, but also it's a magic of, there's a magic in experiencing the moment. That is, and I think that that's really something that, like, I don't know. I don't think a lot about like, I don't what saints were thinking or not, but sometimes I wonder, they talk a lot about ecstasy. They talk a lot about the experience of feeling bliss through spirituality, feeling the bliss of the connection to God, the bliss of the connection to angels that guide them, and every single one of them, right? Experience this eye-opening, earth-shaking, like eye-watering level of bliss. And I think it comes from just fully knowing the strength of power, right? And I think that drag does that in a very unique way. People all of a sudden, their lives just shed off of them. Oh, Rick, we'll miss you.
Yes. Bye, Rick.
Yes. But when you see people at a drag show who are just living for themselves, right? The performer or the audience, it's like they just shed 1,000 pounds off their heart, and you can just see the performer just fully experience it. And then you can just, and I love it as a performer, looking into the audience and seeing like starry eyes. It's one of my favorite things, and to see that is electrifying, but it's also, you can tell that in that one moment, you're fully connected to each other in the moment.
Yeah. Well, I think we're able to allow people to break the chains, to be like free from the chains that are holding them down of what their expectations are as men, as women, as parents, as whatever. I think there's like I don't know, I've heard so many people say like, oh, well, I'm going to try this now. Like maybe they're not going to get in drag, but it kind of inspires them to do, like to lean into something different.
It's liberating. I can't tell you how many people I've run into when I'm performing who say, not, first of all, that was so much fun, blah, 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 but they say, oh my God, that made me think that I could have so much fun like that. And I'm like, girl, duh. I'm like, yes, that's the point. The point is like, whether you believe in one life and an afterlife, and many, many, many lives, regardless of what you believe, you're in this one right now. Right? Like that is the truth. You're here right now doing this thing, this moment. And regardless of your belief, you might as well have a fantastic time.
Get your life.
Yeah.
Totally get your life.
Get your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think spirituality is anything that lifts you, like anything that lifts you in a way and animates you in like a positive, life-affirming, joy-filled way.
Yes, and it completes you, and it gives you a sense of like, this works for me.
Sasha says, can you bring this drag energy outside of being in drag? If yes, how? So yeah, how has your drag affected you outside of drag?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, Sasha, absolutely. First of all, everything is drag, right? So Miss RuPaul, we all quote them. It's like the whole thing, but you're all born naked and the rest is dragon. And I'm not gonna, I think that's just a truism. Everything that we put on, who we are, how we behave, our whole life is a performance. And sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's hard, but everything is a performance. So bringing the energy of, so for me, doing drag woke me up to that idea.
Yeah.
It woke me up to the experience that there is such a thing as just liberating yourself everywhere. And I think for drag, that really did that. It showed me what I'm capable of. I'm capable of commanding someone's attention, but them loving it. I'm capable of loving the moment. I'm capable of trusting myself. I'm capable of trusting others that they'll help me, because there's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, kinship that we all connect with, and to put all of that together, I think those are lessons that I learned through drag, that are just life lessons, right? To trust yourself, to trust others, to have faith in what guides you, to step into your power. Yeah.
Did a particular, so Caitlin says, did a particular performer or experience inspire you to try something new?
Oof. I think every time I look at a drag performer, I have a mantra internally, which is, what am I going to learn from this? What am I going to take from this? What am I looking at that's going to inspire me? And sometimes things don't always speak to me, but I'm like, I'm here to learn. I'm here. Like, I literally have to sit. I'm like, oh, if I'm like sitting like you, it'll happen where you're sitting in the back, just like sort of like, I'm not having a good time. That's like, for the most part, I'm like, okay, sis, what are you here to learn? Why are you here in this bar? Right? Like, try to have fun. What can you learn from this? And so I think some performers that really inspire me to no end are Chicago performers like Joe Mama and Connor Cons, the Geek House ladies, the Geek House performers. There's a sense of liberation in everything they do. Something that I love about what Connor does, Connor Cons, is that they step into a character, and for the whole moment of their experience and their performance, they're completely and entirely that character. And I've seen them do fantastical, bizarre things that you wouldn't even imagine are drag related, spooky, weird things that are fun. They're dressed as Furbies. Their penis is a Furby. They're dressed as Jabba the Hutt. They're Mr. Mime. It's this weird, bizarre level of freedom that comes with this experimenting what it's like to just be liberated to the extent of being like, I'm here to have fun. What are you doing? Right? I think that's something I take a lot of.
Do you feel that drag is an extension of yourself, or it's something that's kind of like, I know some people say it's the character I become, or do you feel like it's an expression of you?
Both. And I know that that's just like the miscongeniality answer, world peace.
It's the correct answer, I think. But
and what do we want? World peace. Like, if we're going to use miscongeniality as an answer, I was watching it like a few weeks ago, so it's still stuck in my head. Gracie Hart wasn't like Gracie Lou Freebush or whatever she was until she was, right? And she put on the character. And then she learned that through being Gracie Lou Freebush, she could be this person. But then later on, she's back to being Gracie Hart. She always is. But, so putting on a character, I think, is a channel by which you can discover things about yourself.
Yeah.
You don't have to. Right. But it's fun.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like for me, that's a lot of how I approach my spirituality or my understanding. It's like, I believe in a God or a divine that it is grace and gives me grace, and in my best divine state, I have grace as well. So it's like, it can be helpful to think of like, what would somebody who is practicing grace, somebody who could have grace in this moment, how would they respond? What would they say? What would they do? What would they not do?
Yes. And there's drag is all about embracing flaws and embracing the unknown, and to do that with the power and the grace that you can and that you can afford yourself. And so I think that, it's all about like learning how those things in drag can teach you to be a better person outside of drag. And Willa, I think a lot of us have felt this way. Willa has granted Tony the confidence to be someone unstoppable, right? And I'm like, Willa would not stand for this.
Right. And I was, what was my question? It was such a good question.
Oh,
girl, she's having those those things tonight where she can't keep her mind together. Juan Pablo has a question. Thank you, Juan. Juan Pablo, when you are not in drag, what do you do most days?
Oh, all right. So like, what do I do for a life, for a living, or for fun? Let's see. Well, first, I play an obscene amount of Breath of the Wild. I got a Nintendo Switch this past year, and I was like, I'm going to play video games. I'm going to be a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
Should I start a Twitch stream? Should I just start like getting in drag and being an idiot and screaming at the top of my lungs whenever I'm being chased by a cyclops? I think you would enjoy that, wouldn't you?
Right.
Comment below.
Totally. Yep. Tell me when.
I'm still learning this. This is the first time I've ever done a live, so I'm still like figuring it all out. But other than this, other than drag, I think so. I work in public health. I work in HIV and LGBTQ health advocacy, and I also used to work in mental health advocacy. So I bring that all together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a master's in public health because I decided that it was the right time to go to school.
Right.
And so I spend a large portion of my time really focusing on equity and health equity work. So that's like my professional life, really advocating for health equity and health access. And then I spend a lot of time with my friends, and we almost always find a good excuse to dress up. We spend so much time dressing up. We're having a party this Sunday, and it's a Love is Dead party, and we're all planning to dress up like gothy moments, just the whole like vampiric pirate Love is Dead interview with a vampire moment. Met emo goth punk because it's Valentine's Day and we just want to have an excuse to dress up and look cute.
Right,
so
right. Yeah. What's your favorite thing to perform, or what's your favorite expression of drag?
So I think that I'm very. How many of us say that we're glamorous in camp? Right. Obviously, I think that that's a very beautiful intersection. But my favorite thing to do is to be wildly stupid. If I tell a drag performer that was so stupid, it is my biggest expression of admiration for their work. Mm-hmm. Like if I tell you that was so stupid, I can't believe it. I once saw Rosemary Maybe put like 3 eggs up her vagina, and I was like, that is wild. That is intense. That is so stupid. Like, why would you do that? But it was amazing. And she was doing it for a filth number related to John Waters. And so it worked perfectly, right? But I love seeing people just be stupid and do things that are just like outside of what you would expect. Like, yes, we love the moments. We love the picking the apples. We love the cows, right? Right. And we also love like the fun, sort of like face crack moments. But when you do something that is just so, and for me, what I like doing is I like storytelling through music and threading a storyline through the lyrics and through the message of the music. And I always like bringing in a song that no one would have expected I would have brought into the storyline. And people say, as soon as you brought in Jordan Sparks' No Air while performing as the Little Mermaid met like the creature from the Black Lagoon, they're like, that was the stupidest thing. I can't believe you were drowning and you were doing Jordan Sparks' No Air. And like, that's so dumb. Why would you do that? And I was like, exactly, that's the point.
Yes, so it's so great. It doesn't seem like that the integration of drag and spirituality, it doesn't seem like that has been a challenge for you. But what would you say to somebody who might be challenged by integrating their drag and spirituality?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it hasn't come easy, right? Like these things don't just come for free. I think incorporating your drag and your spirituality involves an intimate moment of yourself, right? You need to really trust that you have the power in getting to know yourself. And getting to know yourself is a hard thing to do. And it's something that not a lot of us care to do sometimes, because when you look in the mirror, when you turn the magnifying glass on yourself, sometimes the things hurt or they're scary. I struggle with my own mental health journey. I live with mental illness. So when I look in myself, I get scared too. And I think that the experience of looking at yourself, and as you said, granting yourself grace, and then also looking for help to find how to love yourself in this intimate, beautiful, unshakable way.
Right.
Once you can do that, spirituality it's almost the effect of that practice. The practice of like radical self-acceptance and the practice of radical self-love. And when I talk about radical self-acceptance, I'm talking about every moment. Like as I was getting ready today, I had to put on like 2 belts because I was like, oh no, the rolls. And then I was like, no one's gonna see these rolls, girl. And I was like, but I need to feel this whole moment. And I was like, girl, stop. And then I still wore them. But then I realized it was like, I'm wearing them because I want to feel like I'm wearing them so I can feel gorgeous. But I'm not wearing them to look good. And to just practice the experience of being like, regardless of what I'm doing, at the end of the day, the only choice I have is to love myself,
right,
or not. And to not love myself feels like it's less of an option than it used to be. And I think I struggled with that originally, but now I'm like, screw it. I'd rather love myself.
Yeah, well, and to do things that make you, even if it's just that you are enjoying it and you're loving the expression. It's like, yeah, I'm wearing a corset right now. She don't need to be doing that, but I like the way it causes me to stand in a certain way and feel a certain way. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And self-acceptance is about accepting yourself at every moment, at every time, and to find it and to stop the internal dialogue. And if you don't have an internal dialogue, which I just learned some people don't, which is wild. But if you have like an internal message board or like an internal visual board, or maybe if you still have some thoughts that might say things against you, radical self-acceptance is about immediately stopping it and saying, girl, sis, no, you don't treat my friend like that. Right? And to literally almost like step out of your body and say, you don't get to treat my friend like that. My friend is beautiful. My friend is fantastic. My friend is worthy. And we're going to treat them like they're beautiful, fantastic, and worthy today. And you're going to get with the program. And I think that that's really important for me, for mental health, for spirituality, for drag, for art, for the practice of being.
Yeah. Sasha says, I still struggle with self-love and acceptance. Thank you for sharing this.
I love you.
And O's, right? We are like coming up to like the last few minutes of our time together. Is there anything that you wanted to speak to that you haven't gotten a chance to yet?
Well, I think that one of the things that I want to bring forth in my drag even more, and this is something that I didn't mention based on what a question by Caitlin about folks that inspire me. Drag is a power of activism, of visibility, of power. And I've been inspired. In Chicago, there's been this massive movement around the liberation of Black drag queens, the liberation of Black drag kings, the liberation of Blackness, and to grant a space and to empower the Black community in a way that's never happened before, and to reclaim space and reclaim time. Joe Mama has been inspiring in the city, leading the Drag March for Change last year, and then creating the Chicago Black Drag Council. I want to plug that. I'm not a part of it, but I have so many friends who I love who are a part of it. Lucy Stuhl, Miss Toto, Luke, I mean, people who are so fantastic, so absolutely devoted to the movement of empowering and celebrating Black lives. And I mean, last year taught us just how much we need to reckon with our experience of not being a country that affirms Blackness, and that we are not yet at the place of saying Black Lives Matter as a community as a whole. And in the queer community, we need to reckon with that. And so I just want to bring that up and say, like, you know, if I can use this platform to share the experience of the Chicago Black Drag Council, please go look for them. Please go find out what they're doing. I believe they're doing a show this weekend. A Valentine's Day show related show thing. And I was very moved by being a part of that and helping Joe through my experiences, because I have experienced discrimination as a minority. in other ways, and the experience of being Latinx and just being treated differently. And I really want to incorporate all of that in everything we're talking about, in the liberation of communities, the liberation of young children at the border being detained, living away from their parents, right? I couldn't sit through church without being next to my mom.
Yeah.
And I would be furious. Can you imagine what it's like to be a young toddler not being around your mother, or being a mother not being around your child? The fact that they're starving themselves in support of Black Lives Matter of last summer. I really want to bring up attention to these issues, and the attention that the intersections of our power is that drag has helped me find power, and that power I want to use to fight for justice and equity, and to empower our communities into continuing to fight for the vulnerable communities around us, to fight for immigrants, to fight for Latinx communities, to fight for Black communities, to fight for trans communities, to fight for our siblings who deserve justice.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I'll be sure to include it in the description. So folks, when you're watching this, listening to this, look in the description and you can get connected to all of that.
Communities.
Right. Well, and I think it's, I think sometimes people might think drag is just drag, or it's so frivolous and fun, which it is. But however, drag artists have been taking care of people and have been impacting social change and cultural change forever. And now we get to do it in the lines of racial, racial inequalities, and and just taking it further beyond just taking care of us who have AIDS. Now we're going to we're taking it further, and we're changing the world even more as drag artists.
Exactly. Fighting the patriarchy, fighting the cis patriarchy, fighting heteronormativity is a part of everything we need to do as queer people, as people who are allies. I'm an ally to the Black cause, but my cause is to use whatever platform I have, whatever remaining 2.5 minutes, to say Black Lives Matter, and we need to do everything in our power to support everything we do. And right now, Black History Month, right? This is the time. This is the time to support Black businesses, to support Black communities, to fight for organizations that fight for Blackness, like in Chicago, the Brave Space Alliance, which fights for Black trans communities and supports them in every way possible. Or Sista Afia, a community-based mental health organization that's based at Black women empowering Black women for mental health and access to mental health resources. And I think that these are the kinds of things that I care about as a human being. And so hence Willa cares, right? I love being fabulous, but had to say that. Had to plug things in. I don't have performances coming up, so.
Well, thank you so much for all of that. I think that's a great way for us to end the show tonight. Follow Willa Vawisp on Instagram. At Willa Vawisp. Also, the Venmo is there if you want to send her some coin. Right, she'll take it. And then also you can come see Willa perform. I'm getting all excited, but have Willa's going to come perform with the rest of our artists that we've been interviewing on February the 27th at 2 p.m. We're going to do a spiritual drag brunch. We'll bring the drag, you bring the brunch, and we'll be watching that on Twitch due to copyright. So do try to find your way to Twitch. We'll direct you there so that you can watch the show and have a good time. So thanks so much, Willa, for joining us this evening. And all right, and have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.